Okay, can you hear me at all? So yeah, last job, I was working with some statistical information they wanted to gather into spreadsheets and charts. So I picked POI to do that with. So here's some stuff about me. And if my talk isn't all that well, I'm going to blame it on my kitchen. This is about a week ago. And it's looking better. You can see some cabinets there. So my goal for this talk, I really just want to provide whoever might want to use POI with just an example of here's some stuff you can do. Here's the way you do this and that from what I learned while I was there. It's been a few, it's 5-6 months since I've dealt with POI. So I probably forgot a few things. The main topics I wanted to talk about were the styles, formula, and charts. And ask questions at any time and remind me to repeat the question because that's real easy to forget from what I've seen. Here's just a page of some of the resources I used. The top one there is my GitHub. I posted it on the meetup a little bit ago. So you can get the slide deck that I converted to a PDF, and all the code is out there. And then there's the POI project, MyCong. I've gotten a lot of useful Android information and apparently some POI information from there. The Maven repo, if you want to use Maven to get POI and use it. JFree is some charts that I'm using. I really don't remember what Z code is, the next to the last one, and then another MyPOI, or MyCong. All right, so I'm sure everybody knows everything about spreadsheets, right? You get a workbook, which is kind of like a container. It holds one or more worksheets. A worksheet's basically a page. And on a page, you can have a cell, which is referenced by a row and a column. You can identify ranges of cells on the grid. An active sheet is just simply when you open up a workbook, that is the page that is displayed. You don't have to navigate to it, it's just there. Seems like a few years back, POI had some changes come in. So if you're dealing with Microsoft Excel 2003, you want to probably use the HSSF files. I don't think I could get hardly anything to work using that, if I remember right. I had troubles. So the XSSF is a 2007. I'm sure there are some people who know a lot about Microsoft Excel, Word, those kinds of things that would recognize those years as meaningful. I don't. Right, so the XSSF workbook and the HSSF workbook, they basically are your workbook. Then you got the HSSF sheets and XSF. Strangely, it's row and cell for your row and cell. As far as if I remember I could not find a column way to get a column reference. There's probably a way, I never could find it when I was looking for it, which seems odd. So everything almost seems to be row defined. Okay, so here's a series of slides. Just on the right is a spreadsheet workbook, and on the left is what I use to create that. So my first line is create a new workbook. Take that reference, create a sheet, give it a name, and you can see the name down there at the bottom over here where it says my sheet. Then you can create a row. It's zero based. So A1 is row 0, cell 0, column 0. Now to set a value in there, at least in this example, I'm casting it to a string. I can't remember if that's how you always have to do it or not. Active sheet, two different ways to set the active sheet. So when you bring it up, this is the page that will show. And you can actually get the active sheet index while you're working on it if that is something you need to be able to do. This was a weird one. Set column width. I've got it set to 5,000. which is enough for him to show this is cell A1 at font size 10. So it's apparently 1/256th of a character is what that 5,000 each unit is. Yes, sir.
Do you know if that's dependent on the font? If it's in proportion to the character width?
The question was, is that 1/256 dependent on the font? I have no idea. I just found that 256 number in the last few days, so I really don't know. So yeah, if that's important, you'll want to find out how to deal with all that, or stay with the same fonts. And then basically it's just a file, so this is how I wrote it out. Okay, so cells can have styles: borders, fill patterns, rotations, indents, fonts, lots of things like that. And of course, there's the XSF version and the non-XSF. I guess it depends on what you're wanting to do with your cells. If you're really wanting to get fancy, you probably want to use the XSSF guy. If you just want to change the color and maybe the font size, then the cell style may be better, or just as good, or more lightweight. I'm not sure. So using the newer cell style, you can get a cell style, create a cell style by referencing your workbook object and calling the create cell style. Is that? No. Or you can say get cell style at 0. I believe, if I understand this correctly, fonts and styles are kind of like a list in your workbook. So if you've got 5 fonts, you might have font index 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. Same thing with styles. I believe that's what that 0 references. I could be wrong. So yeah, so that second line, my workbook gets cell style at 0. I think that's saying get the first cell style that's in the workbook. And I really haven't looked into that to see if there's any kind of, is there any kind of defaults? Does it automatically come with so many or what? I don't know. And the one thing I liked that I discovered just the other day about the XSF guy is you can get a font from it. Instead of having to create a new font and add that, you can just get it off there and then you can tweak it however you want. And again, in the bottom line, I'm doing a get font at whatever index. All right, so here's a little bit of things you can do. You can obviously you can center something horizontally, and then you would set that on the particular cell. That is one interesting thing, is this is by cell, I believe. So if you wanted to do a whole page, you might have to just navigate over the whole thing and set the style. I'm betting there's a better way, but I don't remember it offhand. Okay, so on the right side there, you see a bit of a spreadsheet with green and letters and numbers, and this is how I generated that spreadsheet. I had a reference to a cell. It may have been A1, I don't know. And I said, get me the style of that guy. And I said, okay, now let's set the alignment to the horizontal alignment to center. So all the stuff is centered, because all these have been applied to every cell. This has been applied to every cell. Set the border style on the left to dashed, and make the foreground color lime, which that doesn't really look lime to me. Solid foreground for the fill pattern, and there is a fill pattern of like diamonds, hash, slash, all that kind of stuff that you would normally maybe see in a bar chart or something like that. Whenever I pulled it up in LibreOffice, whatever it's the spreadsheet thing is called, Calc, this guy, it turns it gray. So I'm not real sure what's going on with that. And here I'm creating a font, and I'm setting the font to red. And it took a bit of playing around to get that red to actually work. The set color, some of the examples I see, there's at least 2 or 3 different flavors, and some work and some don't, depending on what versions of things you're using. And, okay, so once you've got those, that's sort of your cell style. Well, you set the font on the style. And then, yeah, you set the cell style. Okay. I'm not sure what that next to the last line, cell style equals cell style, cell.get cell style. I don't know, I'm not sure what that's for. I think that's, I should probably delete that. All right, so that's enough about styles. Let's look at formulas. So if you've ever worked with a spreadsheet and summed up a row or a column, should look slightly familiar. It's zero-based. So if my row is 8, that really references row like 9, right? If you're looking at your spreadsheet, like A9 or I9 or whatever. So I'm summing up the column A9 through O9 is what all that does. Creating a cell. Oh, yeah, that's something I haven't gone over. So you've got a data sheet, you've got a row, you get your row, whatever. You have to create your cell. You have to create your rows. They're not just there. If you try and you create a new workbook, a new worksheet, and try and use a row or a cell, it's going to give you like a null pointer probably or something like that. I've neglected to mention that. So this get row I, obviously I had to have created that first. And then I'm doing a create cell 15 and just setting the formula to whatever's in quotes and plus signs and more quotes. So it should look like this blue thing down here. You can do averages, lots of other things. I think I was doing some standard deviation type stuff. It was interesting. So one thing I ran into when I was playing with the averages was you end up with 5.73, just a real long number off to the right of the decimal. So the get format there on the bottom right really makes it look a little better. All right, so you create formulas. These formulas have to be evaluated at some point. And from what I can tell, there are 4 different ways to do these evaluations. I ran into this when I was creating formulas and putting them there in the spreadsheet, and then I wanted to use those formulas to do other calculations later. Well, I got nothing like what I expected. I was expecting a number to come back, but it was actually the formula, and it really didn't do what I wanted. So you have to actually, if you want to use a formula that you've just written onto your spreadsheet, you're going to have to evaluate it and either get the value, say, give me the value of that formula, or something along those lines before you can actually do something with the value that is represented by that formula. Okay, so here's one way. It basically says, whatever my cell is, it's hopefully a formula, evaluate it and give me the value of that cell. And so this field cell value would store that value. The cell still has the formula in it. So anytime you want to reference the value, you would either use the cell value or you'd have to do the evaluate again. This is probably one of the, I don't want to say this is the way I did it most of the time, but this was probably the most useful. This one is kind of interesting. It recalculates the formula. Recalculates the, I'll have to wait till we get to the examples to see exactly what recalculates the formula does, but I believe it basically regenerates the number that is represented there, which would make me think you have changed some data that feeds into that. First line up here, that's kind of important. Workbook, get creation helper, create formula, evaluator. Probably should have mentioned that first. So you've got to create an evaluator. As far as I know, you only need one. I don't know that you need to go creating tons of these. I would assume so. It's been too long. I really don't remember. I'll leave that as an exercise for the student. All right. So Evaluate in cell was the most weird. I just thought it was strange. So you've got a formula in a cell and you say evaluate in cell. It's going to take that cell and replace whatever formula you had with the value. So if that formula calculates out to 10, it's going to put a 10 in there and your formula's gone. I mean, maybe that's really useful if you don't want to show people how you're doing things. It just seemed really odd. I don't know. That was just me. But I think that's the third way. And now my favorite way is every formula in my workbook, calculate them or evaluate them. So just one time, boom. So that would be useful if you didn't need to recalculate or retrieve values. You were just basically generating all these formulas with all this data, and then you wanted it to evaluate them. No, and then you wanted to do something with them. I don't think you would need to do any of that if you were just going to save the file and then someone opened it. I could be wrong. We should probably play with that in a little bit because I don't remember. All right. Okay, so the first example is where it just returns the calculated value. So if I've got a formula of 5 times 10 times 2, and you'll notice when you specify the formula, there's no equal sign. I guess it's kind of redundant because you're doing a set cell formula, so you don't have to tell it. I don't know, I tried to put an equal sign in there when I was playing with it, and it didn't care for that much. All right, so we calculate the cell value, or we say evaluate the cell, and it's going to show us 100. 5 times 10 times 2. The cell will still have 5 times 10 times 2 in it. Okay, so this one we got 5 times 10 times 2, and we say evaluate formula cell. Recalculates the formula. Yeah, I'm not really sure what that's doing. I don't know. I guess it's recalculating it. Let's see, evaluator. All right, so this replaces the value. So 5 times 10 times 2 is what my formula is. I say evaluate in cell, and now my cell has the value of 100. And it's a numeric cell type as opposed to formula.
Question.
Yo.
So I saw these examples looking at the numeric cell value and things like that with specific naming methods. Is there a way to get the value of a cell as it's displayed in Excel without specifically specifying the type? That
Okay.
is to say, I just say get value instead of get number value or get numeric value. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question I believe was, is there a way to get the value of a cell without having to know what type of data is in the cell by calling a get formula or get number or whatever? The examples I saw, you had to know. That sounds like an easy generic kind of thing someone could write, but maybe that's already out there. I don't know, I guess I was dealing with numbers so much, it was never really an issue for me. All right, so charts. So the chart on the right was not created, but it was started by this code on the left. So I've got some data here where we've got A, B, C, and that's probably not very readable, is it? Anyway. So that's where this data is coming from, is from a bunch of data, the sheet called a bunch of data. So JFree chart, I believe, is a open source way to create bar charts and different kinds of charts. So you can get a chart factory and create a bar chart, and you feed it a bunch of stuff, and it will create you a bar chart object. Right. So we can see the title is subject versus marks. Category axis label at the bottom is subject. Marks is also at the bottom. The data set is my bar chart data set, which I haven't shown you how I created that yet. It's going to be a vertical plot orientation. We're going to have a legend and tooltips. All right. Now this is just some strangeness. I found it really strange. Just to create my bar chart, I basically have to make it a picture. So we're making it a PNG file. Dang it, sorry. And that's all this code's doing out here, is taking that bar chart object and saying, create buffered image and your height and width, and then we basically write it out to a file. And so kind of along the lines of the styles and font indexes, pictures seems like they have it's a list of pictures and it has an index as well. I think, I'm kind of guessing, just that's what it seems. So when I add my picture to my workbook, it gives me an idea to reference, an ID to reference that guy with. So whenever I want to do anything with it, I'll have to know that ID. Okay, so chartout.close. Okay. Now there's a lot of other things that go into making this, and I don't understand a lot of this, like this drawing patriarch. I'm not really sure what that is. But we also have to create an anchor for our chart, so it's going to be in like column 4, row 5. Something like that is where we want the upper left corner to be. And then we're going to do a drawing, which was our drawing patriarch. Create my picture. Here's my anchor and my ID. So here's where I want you to anchor it, and here's the picture reference. This last line, resize, I don't understand it, but it will not show up unless you put that in there. I don't know what the heck it's doing. I already told it how big I wanted it. So resize makes it poof, show up. It was really strange. Link to a specific JFree chart dual axis demo. I don't think I actually got that one working since I left my previous job. So this is a little more interesting of a bar chart. This is the Statistical Bar Chart Demo 1. Actually, let's see if I've got that here. Yep. Yeah. So this data is all random. So that's going to be different than that. But it's all derived from this data here. Okay. So bar chart. Oh, look at that. So I am going to create a worksheet called First Data. Yes, I will be happy to. Oh man, it's not working. There. All right. Is that any better? No. Get rid of that. How do I get rid of this thing? Just close it. All right. Sorry. Just trying to bar chart sheet. Okay, so this is the code that makes up this guy. I don't know that we care too much about it. So to create that guy, I just iterated so many times, generated a data set, and then wrote it out. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to find this guy, I think. All right, so this guy's a little different. First thing we're going to do is create a data set. Okay, so I passed in a sheet, and I'm just doing I've 1 for 5 or 5 times, and we're going to create 2 sets of data, row 1 and row 2. Okay, and does anybody know anything about these kinds of charts? Because I don't. Dang, how do you get back to where you were? There we go. All right, there we go. No? All right. So this is going to be an SVG as opposed to a PNG file. So we're giving it width and height, height and width.
So you create your data set and pass it to your create chart that's using that API you're talking about?
Yep, sorry.
Or you
Yep, here's the create chart where we're calling the factory and we're creating a line chart, giving it some information in the data set. Yeah, sorry about that. And this, yeah, gets the plot. And again, I think all this I just grabbed from somebody. But it's kind of cool, you can do some gradients. So I'm creating a new file, writing it out to the file. So interesting thing here is I'm both writing it out to a file and adding it to my workbook. So I add it to my workbook basically the same way as I did that other one. And again, the resize. I thought this was interesting. I haven't looked at too many SVG files, but they're vector-based, and basically there's our spreadsheet, or not our spreadsheet, sorry, our chart, bar chart. Okay, and actually that was it, wasn't it? Again, we've got the drawing patriarch that gets used down here to create my picture. We anchor it. That information. All right. So to me, the interesting part is how do you create that data set?
you're just telling us 5 columns, so it's 2 rows, 5 columns?
It looks like 5 columns, yeah, because it's cell I. So row 1, so it should be using, I don't know, is it this one or this one? Nope, it's this one. So like 82, 85, 44, 42. And sorry. So 82 and then 58. Yeah, there's my 82, here's my 58. 85, 32. I've lost it. Is it going on to the right then?
Yeah, 21.
21, 38, okay. 21, 38. And then these numbers are, I don't remember. I have to look at the code, I think. Okay, row 3 and 4. So 85, 44. There we go. So this is like 85, I guess. Whoops, sorry. 44. All right, but you can figure this out if you get hold of it. Right. So we're doing rows 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and all that's doing is creating the colored bar charts and then these lines. All right. So I'm going to go see if I can get that pie chart. There's the pie chart. There it is. Awesome. All right. Okay, pass in my workbook. I'm making a chart. Give it a name. Create the sheet. Create it. Give it a name. Create a data set. That is weird. So this is a hard-coded, yeah, obviously one that someone, that I stole from someone. So it's like mobile phones, I guess. And others. It's kind of interesting. You can barely make out smartphone manufactured. All right, so we go back.
Is that using the same library created for your chart?
I believe so. It's using the SVG graphics 2D again. Wow, that's it. I'm looking for the title. Sorry, where it's got the smartphones manufactured. I'm just curious where that's coming from. Wow, I don't know. Oh. NetBeans really irritates me with that always being on. There it is.
Oh, when you create
Okay, right. So I create my data set, then I call it create chart, and I feed the title in when I'm creating and I tell it what kind of pie chart I'm creating. So it looks like you've got area charts, box, and whisker. What the heck? Bubble charts, candles, Gantt, histograms. There's a few out there. So depending on what you're wanting to do, there's lots of different charts. And obviously the data set that you provide is critical to those kinds of, to whatever kind you're trying to create.
there's your title.
Yeah,
Taking the color right there.
yeah, right there. Oh, I see, 240. Cool. Let's go back here. That's better. All right, so I just, whatever the default color is what's going to show there, I guess. Black. Right, so we're removing the legend, creating the title, and yeah, setting the alignment to left, the font, plotting the pie chart, interior gap 0.04. That sounds real interesting. And then this is interesting. I hadn't noticed this. So we're providing the names more than once? Is that, am I reading that right? Yeah, that's weird. Okay. Yeah, I don't understand why we would need to provide those, but that's fine. So we've got different colors that we're providing for each of these guys. Your font, I don't know what link paint, I guess the color between the pie pieces, how big they are, outline stroke, I forgot what that means. Oh, stroke, right. So the outline is null. There's no like heavy, thick black line around your label, I guess. And it's white. Yeah, the letters are white. And there's no background paint. Okay. And we're setting a source for the text title. All right. It's a picture, so I'm not really sure what the URL is going to do for anybody. Maybe there's something. Okay. And I think think that's about it. When you get to this point, you're pretty much done, I think. But before you, well, you got to write it out. And I think that's all of that. And where to go? All right, so there's our pie chart. One thing I found interesting, just kind of looking around at all this, for some reason this struck me as something that might be useful to somebody. It's a Apache project, Tika maybe. It detects and extracts metadata and text from over 1,000 different file types, and they can be parsed through a single interface. It's useful for search engine indexing, content analysis, translation. Anybody dealing with that sort of thing, I thought they might find that useful. And I think that's all the slide deck. Is there anything anybody wants to look at before I go off and play? I was going to try and find some code that. So one of the pieces of the spreadsheet just shows data types. So I think this was from Mykong, one of their examples, where they generate a list of lists with, the different data types in Java, right? And I want to say their size, but no, I don't know what that is actually. Oh yes, and so I set a column width to 500 just to try and see. This right here is 500. This is 5,000, I believe. So you get an idea how big a difference there is in for the column width. And
so that's back to 256 character.
So actually that's probably bigger than it should be. No, 500, that'd be 2 characters, wouldn't it? So yeah. And again, we got the instance of string and integer that he was wondering about. Oh, that's where that code is. Okay, sorry, I was looking for that. That's what's causing that one thing to be all gray. This right here is gray because of the diamonds. So if I open it back up, it should be, yep, back to white. Good. And here's my examples for the different cells. That was something I'd mentioned, wasn't it? That I was going to, yeah. I don't know. I think I'm about done unless somebody's got other questions. Yes?
Do you have an example of reading a spreadsheet?
A what?
Reading a spreadsheet, yeah.
Oh, reading. Yeah, kind of. Okay, the question was, do I have an example of reading a spreadsheet? Since this data is basically coming from the spreadsheet, when I'm generating the bar charts and such, I'm reading a lot of that data from the spreadsheet that I've already generated. So if I were to go find a bar chart, I would probably show how I did that. This looks promising.
So even though it says create sheet, that sheet already exists, it's like it's creating it in memory, right?
Well, the workbook exists, the sheet does not. So it is creating this bar chart. So I'm generating the, I'm generating the bar chart sheet values. And I'm getting this, whatever this first data is. That is first data, okay. Which is right here, okay. So that's what's in first data. And so we probably are interested in what data sheet is doing in this. So I get an iterator off a data sheet, okay. And it's called row iterator. And so this is, I really don't remember writing this code. So I get a row, now I get a row iterator off my, okay, I get a row off my row iterator, and I get a cell off my cell iterator. Yeah, whatever. So that right there is where I'm,
Each line and then each cell.
sorry?
Going through each line and then each cell.
Yes. So, right. So this right here is where I'm getting the value of a cell. And if it is a numeric field, then I set my chart data field to that value, which, what is he, an object or something? Or, yeah, he's a number. Okay. Okay.
What's the object class representing the overall spreadsheet?
This, the spreadsheet or the workbook? I mean,
Higher
that right there, the XSF workbook is the,
Well, can you create a workbook from a file and only from XLS extensions?
well, that's a good question. You can read in a spreadsheet. I'm not real sure about the file extension, if that matters. You may get, I don't know, that would have to be played with. I didn't go down that road. I was more interested in, I assume that this XSF expects the data in a certain layout, right? The spreadsheet or the workbook. The whatever the HSSF is probably different format. Yeah, you'd have to look at that. I didn't, initially when I was working with these at my job a year ago, I was reading in a spreadsheet. And I quickly realized that wasn't going to work. I was better off just generating it from the data. You know, that's not true. Because I basically was taking my SQL database and dumping it into a bunch of files and reading those, dumping them into a spreadsheet or a bunch of spreadsheets and reading those in and generating this data from that. So I was reading it, but I wasn't trying to update it. I was just reading it and creating a new spreadsheet.
Can we look at the format and
The what?
your big bar chart, and see what it's called?
Can you repeat the question? Hang on.
I'm not hearing it.
Can you show us where make bar chart please is called?
Oh, where it's called from. Okay, so you want to know where make bar chart please is called from?
Yes, please.
I want to say somewhere in here. So this is POI Uno. I don't know why I'm mixing, I don't know. Yeah, so you've got, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the main class. There we go. So the main class creates a POI Uno and says, make me a spreadsheet. And in that make me a spreadsheet this is basically where I'm doing all my things, and then at the very end I'm writing it out. So I'm passing in workbooks everywhere I go, generating all this.
Now may I see do something fun?
Oh, is that in here somewhere?
Yeah, it's right there, right by your cursor. Yeah,
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, it's not very fun. This is where it's generating, it's that code that I stole that
okay. Yeah.
basically spits out the Java data types, or primitive data types. Well, mostly primitive, I guess. Oh, take it away from me before he gets...
I think there's another question here. Hang on.
Yeah, so that's basically reading.
That's the part I was going to say, is you're creating that new workbook, and then creating a new worksheet, calling the get sheet first data. I was missing that part.
Yeah. Yeah, make some more data. I thought there was a different random in Java now. Yeah.
So you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that there are different classes, HSS versus XSS, to handle 2003 versus 2007 formats of Excel. Is there any validation to check when you're saving the file that you save it into a file with the correct extension? Obviously, the programmer knows which one they're using. I'm just wondering if there's a check.
I mean, to me, it seems like, at least the way I've been saving the file, it's just not even related to creating the spreadsheet. I mean, it's just, I'm just writing a file out in Java the way I normally do. But.
So you just get a byte stream, basically?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Output stream, whatever, flavor. Yeah, so I don't know of any. Well, and I ran into that. I couldn't open some files, or they had tons of errors in them. And so it took a bit of time to play with it and figure out what would work and what wouldn't. I'm trying to remember. I was working in Ubuntu, generating spreadsheets for Windows, Excel. So I was trying to pull them up in Calc, and they'd work fine. Bring them up in Windows, and there'd be errors all over the place. So it's, I don't know. And it seemed, looking back, I remember being frustrated at times because it just seemed like there's missing stuff. Things that seemed obvious to me that I would love to have that I couldn't find that didn't seem to be there. But then again, it's open source, and it's, I don't know, it's been around a while. And I do know a committer, if anybody, I think he was more on the Word document side. But I think that's it. Unless you guys got any more questions?
I have one more.
Yes.
You talked a little bit about why you started doing this. Was there anything that you would have rather done? For example, instead of using this, you would have used a different method? Because I'm trying to decide, should I put the effort in to try to learn how to do all this, or should I just do VBA? Or
Yeah, I remember looking around to see what else was out there. Like, I was kind of interested in see if there's anything that I could do with Node, and I can't remember if I found anything or not. It's been too long. And this was going to be like a standalone, kind of just kick off this executable jar every once in a while. But yeah, I don't really remember any specific things that do the same sort of thing. I'm sure they're out there, but I'm not aware of, I can't remember any of them if I knew them.
I have a question. How good is the library to abstract whether you want to do like a LibreOffice document like you did, or Excel? Like how abstracted is the different formats, even though a spreadsheet is a spreadsheet?
I'm assuming it's following, some standard, but obviously there was some differences in Calc and Excel. And it may have been me using like 2003 type library pieces that was causing the problems, and maybe it was the J-free chart, but I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Because I left that job.
Any other questions? Okay, I think that
All right.
should do it then. Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.